China's Coast Guard has conducted new patrols around the contested Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. The activity coming a day after Beijing carried out joint air and sea drills in the very same area, as tensions with the Philippines show no signs of easing. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has reiterated Manila's stance, stressing that it does not agree with China's definition of its sovereign territory. The Philippines also summoning China's ambassador to protest a set of geographic coordinates set up by Beijing, defining 16 baselines around the Scarborough Shoal. China says it was just responding to two new laws signed by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., cementing Manila's claims to the South China Sea in domestic law. A protest also from Malaysia, saying it plans to send a note to the Philippines over its new maritime laws, given its own overlapping claims in these contested waters. Relations between China and the Philippines in particular have deteriorated in recent years, with the region around the Scarborough, Second Thomas and Sabina shoals becoming major flashpoints. However, confrontations have reduced in number since an agreement between Beijing and Manila in July over resupply missions to a grounded vessel in the Second Thomas Shoal. A former Philippine Supreme Court Associate Justice, though, has criticized this deal. Antonio Carpio, who was part of Manila's 2016 arbitration case in The Hague, says he sees this as a concession to Beijing. But the Foreign Affairs Secretary says that verbal agreement has produced results. For more, Buena Bernal joins us live from Metro Manila. Buena, some may find that agreement between China and the Philippines unacceptable. But what other, at this point, what other alternatives are there to this provisional agreement?
This provisional understanding, which according to my sources at the National Task Force for the West Philippine Sea, how the Philippines calls its maritime zone in the larger South China Sea, requires a quote-unquote meeting of the minds between these two nations prior to Philippine resupply missions to Second Thomas Shoal, where a grounded World War II ship called BRP Sierra Madre serves as a Philippine military outpost. And so retired Philippines Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio arguing that allowing China to have a prior exchange of information with the Philippines before these resupply missions is essentially a concession of the Philippines' sovereign rights in the area, because Second Thomas Shoal lies within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. He further argues that this sets a bad precedent for the Philippines, because then China can ramp up aggression in other disputed areas in the South China Sea and later on force the Philippines to also conduct a meeting of the minds or prior exchange of information for key movements out in the South China Sea. Now, one official responding to this says that while there is a meeting of the minds prior to the resupply missions, there is still a free-flowing operation by the Philippines whenever out at sea in those resupply missions to Second Thomas Shoal. I also spoke with the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Enrique Manalo, who argues that this understanding is in no way conceding the sovereign rights of the Philippines, because it actually has been able to, quote-unquote, achieve results.
Oh, Bernal, what results might Secretary Manalo mean when he says that this deal in July has had results?
This provisional understanding came about after a June 17 incident that was an unprecedented level of violence between the Philippines and China in a resupply mission the Philippines had to Second Thomas Shoal, where an assault, or what the Philippines called a brutal assault by China, ended in an injury of a Filipino elite Navy personnel. So since this provisional understanding was secured, no such violent incidents in resupply missions to Second Thomas Shoal of the Philippines has been recorded. Likewise, two successful rotation and resupply missions were conducted since this provisional understanding, one in late July and another one in early September. I also know from high-ranking sources within the Philippines security establishment that Philippine Navy personnel are already trained in the use of unmanned surface vehicles. These are remote-controlled vessels that can be used for these resupply missions. But an official saying that these vessels are not yet being used precisely because that provisional understanding is working when it comes to resupply missions to BRP Sierra Madre.
Oh, well, thanks, Buena Bernal joining us live there from Metro Manila.